Really, when you drill down to it, ministry is defined by degree of intimacy and nothing else. There's a lot of quiet strength in our very, very wounded church.
Hello, and welcome back to Religion to Reality, where this week we're going to be talking about formation, from lived experiences to practical applications. I'm your host, Dave Plisky, joined by my friend and co-host, Father John Gribowich. In our discipleship study, we saw that there was pretty significant interest among Mass-attending Catholics in receiving ongoing faith formation, whether it be through in-person communities or something app-based. Today, we wanted to get a better understanding of some of the barriers that exist to people receiving that formation, as well as some of the practices that have worked for others. So, John, what kind of experience do you have in the area of faith formation?
Well, I think I've been somehow involved with faith formation for quite some time. I mean, I've been a Catholic high school teacher for, well, really the better part of 20 years in different capacities. And of course, as a priest, you kind of get involved with lots of different dimensions of faith formation, from sacramental prep, RCIA, to marriage prep. I feel is a form of faith formation. I've been doing that really ever since I was a seminarian. And also, I did a lot of faith formation in the context of liturgical music over the years too, from being someone who did music in the context of retreats and conferences. I feel like there's a lot of faith formation in that area as well. When I think about my own early faith formation, I think a lot of it came from a lot of the songs that we sang at church, believe it or not. So there's so many different ways that formation happens.
Agreed.
So Dave, tell me about like what's been faith formation been like for you, like both like say giving and receiving.
Yeah, it's a great question. Formal faith formation for me was kind of the typical path of a kid who went to public school and went to CCD and stuff at the parish and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like what you said resonated. There's a line in a Bruce Springsteen song: "I learned more from a 3-minute record, baby, than we ever learned at school."
Mm-hmm.
I think faith formation
Mm-hmm.
is the same exact way, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's these momentous formative experiences that do a lot of the pulling compared to kind of traditional catechesis, let's say. And I think the issue with traditional catechesis is that we might have said this already, that it focuses on kind of the wrong thing first. It's not trying to help someone to know God, right? To develop a relationship with God. It's trying to help someone know about God, right? So here are the things that we, as the denomination that we call Catholicism, believe about the truth about the world. So the thing I was going to say that I think we might have discussed before is like this backwards idea that you first need to behave so that you believe the right things, and that'll get you to feel like you belong in the church. And we do that, whereas the right way to do it is to welcome people into a community of belief. And so they belong first, they come to believe, and then they'll see why it's so advantageous for them to live a good life, a moral life that is what we call behaving.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I mean, so much of formation seems to always come in the idea of what one should believe and what one should not believe. And that seems to always be about like parameters or putting limits on things or trying to understand what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I feel like while there's a place to understand that those boundaries are there to keep us safe from falling into just say really a detrimental life of some sort, I could see that's the intention behind that. The reality of who God isn't necessarily defined by the rules per se. It's defined by an encounter with just the full awareness that you are loved. I mentioned about like how formation for me came through a lot of songs. I just really always had an impression of a very loving God. And I felt like that's a good starting point. I mean, we should start with love and mercy and then be able to realize that, that experience of love demands a response. And that type of response really, I think, is at the very heart of understanding what behavior is. It's not necessarily making sure that we can earn God's love, but being so in awe of God's love that it causes us to want to be a certain way, to be our best version of ourselves.
Exactly. So when we polled, Mass attending Catholics in our study, we did hear that people were very interested in receiving faith formation, especially around, to prepare them for evangelization. What I want to highlight about that is that we heard the same types of things coming from the response in the Synod on Synodality that Pope Francis led, both in the Diocese of Brooklyn as well as around the country and around the world. That formation is an understood need, a felt need of the faithful. So I'd like to hear more about it from some of the people that we talked to. For this week's episode, we spoke with 3 guests who all have different experiences with providing formation. First up, we have Dr. Bill Keimig, the Deputy Director of the Catechetical Institute at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. The Catechetical Institute is an outreach of the university that essentially helps to educate and form those who will form others. We spoke with him about how trust is so important to the process.
And I would say the trust has to be in 2 forms. You're witnessing to the fact that you trust God in all circumstances, which has a million ways of being witnessed to, in small things and large, right? So you're witnessing to who you trust. But the second aspect of that is that you're witnessing that you're trustable. And the form that must take is all the small interactions, especially if you're in a place for a long time, people begin to share their message with you and open up to you, is you have to become provably interested in their good without a manipulative aspect to it or an agenda to it. And that essentially is what good RCIA is, or OCIA. It's basically they encounter a bunch of Catholics that are unequivocally clear that we want you, but we will do nothing to manipulate your choice because we want to leave you free in the Holy Spirit to choose us. Make no mistake, we want you, but we will respect your freedom in every way in this process, which most RCA processes do not do well. They do a cattle call to a calendar rather than a conversion focus for the individual. And that's a lot of what we do in doing immense numbers of trainings for dioceses, try to help them see the lock into the school year model and the way things are done, the programmatic grafting that is common in confirmation programs and other things, where a programmatic aspect overtakes the norms of personal conversion, essentially is communicating the system saying, our agenda with you is your movement, not your choice. Mm-hmm. And that communicates a very clear thing, is that the system actually isn't interested in my good. They're just interested in my acquiescence. And as soon as that breaks down, you've broken down essentially the key thing of trust, which is, how do I know that you are for my good? And so that trust has to be in that way. And there's no other way that that can be but highly personal in the root of it, especially why that's essentially why the church teaches, not because of competence, if you will, in terms of skill, I think, that the parent is the primary educator. Not because, I'm a father of 6, not because I'm particularly good at it as a skilled teacher or know the sensitive periods of each of my kids or have done that study. I should and might, but it's not because of that. I'm the primary educator because whoever is the primary source of trusting intimacy in your life will be the primary educator. Whoever that is, whoever is the highest intimacy in your life in a trusting way will automatically be the primary educator, because that's what it means to be formed, is encountering souls that you can trust intimately. So whoever the closest one is, and that's why the parent is typically that, because of course that's supposed to be the parent. Mm-hmm. It's an automatic, because the terms, what ministry is terms of intimacy, not terms of role, or there's ways to understand ministry as priest, prophet, king, and all those things. But really, when you drill down to it, ministry is defined by degree of intimacy and nothing else.
Bill, can you think of a parish that has successfully made that switch from being, kind of a OCIA by the calendar type of approach to this personal, kind of relationship approach that you're describing is so?
Yeah, lots of them. It's one of the most common questions. We've trained, I've been privileged to train in not always OCIA, but a lot of them, the majority of them, in over 80 dioceses, and done, like almost a dozen this fall alone. And I see lots of people that are exactly what you were saying. They want what the church wants. They want to be on the church's page and figure this out, because they give their blood, sweat, toil, and tears to be an RCA, right? Their time on Thursday nights and everything else it involves to be an RCA. They're giving themselves. And all they want from us is clarity of, okay, what does work? Because I don't want to spin my wheels here. I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to hurt these people. I don't want to give them less. And I'm giving myself. So all they want, I find this all over the country, all over the world, because I've done England this year as well. There's lots of strength in the church, in the ranks of people that are simply, They want to do what's good for their neighbor that they're giving themselves to in some ministry form. And so, yes, we have lots of people ask us, okay, the practical things of that. How do you move from a school year capture to a year round model? And how do you begin that? And how do you do that in a rural parish, like a 50 family parish in Fargo, North Dakota, or a 4,000 family parish in Modesto, California? How do you do that in those places? And that's obviously what a lot of our work is to give the exact and practical answers of the entry points, the terms of success, what it looks like, and to hook them to people that they can talk to, which is a large portion of because we have a mentor based system of talking to people who've done this. One of our favorite people, maybe you'll have her on this podcast at some point, is Lori Smith out in California, who's done amazing things in Chico, California, Sacramento diocese for stuff. But we have our collection of experts, if you will, that have done this and messed with it and figured it out and tried to figure it out and then tried to figure out how to train people and been around the block a few times to figure out how to communicate this to another. So yeah, I mean, that's what our business is, to find those subject matter experts. But Dave, there's no lack of people that want this and want the clarities that lead to it. There's a lot of quiet strength in our very, very wounded church. There's a lot of quiet strength in our very wounded church.
John, why is trust so important in formation?
Yeah, I think it's just fundamentally important in all relationships, right? I mean, I struggle with that in so many different ways in different projects that I work on with people, or just sometimes in relationships in general. When I feel like I can't trust the other person, it just naturally makes me not want to go all in with that person, or to go all in with, say, being part of a team or a project of some sort. And if you don't go all in, then your full self doesn't show up, and then you're not actually allowing whatever gifts, talents, blessings, graces that you have to be revealed for the greater good, really, of the world. So like trust is like that entry point to unleash just the reality of who we are. And if we don't feel like we have it in the context of the person that we're with or the people that we're with, then we are kind of stifling just the reality of who we are and the gift that we are. So I think it's just foundational. And when we talk about bringing more people into the church, let's say, or however we would like to talk about it, like people converting to the faith or encountering God, however, really the reason why we get excited about that is because now a person can fully be themselves, and their gifts, their graces, their blessings are now going to be on display for the greater good. And so I think that's really why we like to see people come into the church, for example, because now these gifts are going to be used for the greater good of the church. If that's not the motivation, then it's another indication that we don't really trust that they have what's needed for the church. And then that's just a disastrous situation at that point, right? So, I mean, like, no one wins at that point, So I just think that there's so many ramifications to that simple word of trust. I mean, what's it been like for you to be able to just trust people in your own life? I mean, I think you would understand, as any person would, that trust is essential.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't even think I have any profound words to say about it. It's just, what kind of relationship are you going to have with someone you don't trust? Not much of one, certainly not one of intimacy.
Right.
And I guess it matters because the relationships that we have with one another are meant to be modeling the relationship that we hope to have with God, right? If the whole point, if what we're talking about in formation is bringing someone into a more intimate relationship with God, then how are we possibly going to convince them of how that is possible if we ourselves are not able to enter into some kind of intimacy with that person that we're trying to bring into that, right? There's got to be some modeling on there. You just mentioned conversion. Dr. Bill Keimig mentioned personal conversion when he was talking. And I guess my question to you is, like, what does personal conversion mean? Or maybe put differently, what would an impersonal conversion be? Are people making inauthentic conversions? Are people thinking that they're converting, but they're not really, because it's not personal enough in some way? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I guess maybe when we talk about personal, we're talking about some level of accountability of some sort. Maybe that's what it is. I mean, accountability ultimately to God, accountability to the community. And maybe if a person isn't really fully allowing themselves to be accountable, that maybe that conversion is not really that deep. Maybe that's what that means. I just don't, I don't know. What do you think about it?
I think it might have to do with, being true to our vocation, what God is calling us to do, right? So like the last time we were talking, I was telling you about how my approach to the faith was sort of through the kind of the true in terms of the transcendentals. I certainly entered the church through the true more than through the beautiful or the good, because I was always up in my head, and in a lot of ways I still am, you know. And so for me, part of my conversion, or my continual conversion, because there's like kind of like a moment conversion, but then it's also like we're constantly called to metanoia, to this change of heart and mind. And I feel like for me, I needed to be able to involve more than just my head, in my relationship with God. I needed to get past the true and understand, what is good religion actually for? What am I entering into a relationship for? It's not just to be right. It's not so I'm like,
Right.
God's purpose is not to affirm my amazing philosophy. It's salvific, yes, but that also means it's healing, And so understanding, God as physician, not just God as even a good father, or beyond the angry father that we talked about before. Even a good father is still, not all of who God is, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to personal conversion, that's what I think of as like, well, what is it that this person specifically needs that they might be lacking when it comes to a life in Christ?
Well, I think it's an excellent way of looking at it. I mean, yeah, everyone is in a place of ongoing conversion for that very reason. Everyone's on a process of being healed, and that's unique for each and every person, because each and every person has been wounded in a unique way. So however someone has been wounded, there's a unique type of healing that is required to bring that person into a full life in God. And that's why, like, prescription models, which tend to be what formation offers, like, these are all the things that you should do to have a good life, in to be able to have a joyous life in Christ. If you do all these things, everything is going to be working out great. And that's just simply not the case. They are prescriptions at best, but we know that even the best prescription for a particular medicine doesn't heal every single person. So it's a prescription that gives us a starting point, but clearly not an ending point, and clearly not a personal point for us to really be able to encounter the love of God. That's something that happens just one person at a time, and no two people are the same. I also like what you're saying too, Dave, about like the whole intellectual dimension of conversion for people in formation. Lots of people get involved in becoming Catholic because they are just kind of caught up in, say, the intellectual tradition of the church, how things just make sense, and they are kind of awed by the beauty of the truth of the church that comes, let's just say, through the intellect. And there's something very powerful there that cannot be denied. But when it kind of moves to the place of like, well, conversion is about winning the argument, so to speak, in any context, that is a big problem, because then at that point, you're no longer really even focusing on the person and their wounds and hurts. You're just trying to convince them of some type of argument that they should sign off on.
So while Dr. Keimig's ministry is focused on forming those who form others, we wanted to zoom the microscope down a notch on someone who has worked with people directly seeking formation. We spoke with Cindy Black, who we actually heard from on the first episode on decompartmentalization. Cindy is a pastoral associate at St. Vincent de Paul Parish in the Diocese of Fort Wayne, South Bend in Indiana. She has also worked in Catholic radio and has years of experience helping others who are approaching the Catholic Church for the first time.
When people long for formation, I think sometimes they think like theology. I want to understand how to explain the sacramental life of the church, or apologetics, where formation, if you really think of the word, it's being formed into other Christs. So, and I think sometimes we think that we have to have all the answers before we like go out to evangelize. But that's, I mean, look who Jesus called us his disciples. None of them were scripture scholars. They were the ragamuffin, just normal people, or the hated people with the tax collector with Matthew. And they didn't know, but they had had an encounter with Jesus and his love, and they were transformed and they wanted to share that. And they learned as they went about doing it, because the Holy Spirit wants us to live that self-giving mutual encounter in every exchange. So we become formed the more we do it and the more we try to see like Christ sees and receive the other. And I think sometimes we've created a consumer parishioner. I work with one of my colleagues, Michael Dopp. We were talking about this some time ago, and he gives talks on evangelization. And people will hear a talk and they're like, we need more of this. What's the next thing? We need to bring in speakers. And he's like, no, the end of evangelization is for you to go out and do it, to radically love people, not have the next thing that you get something out of. It's giving what you've already received away, where we're formed into Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, the consumer Christian is a very real thing, consumer Catholic, real thing. I mean, we are attracted to, you know, good speakers. We're attracted to the beauty and truth that is revealed in logical arguments, all those types of things. But yeah, I mean, just making it more heady, which I think is what we value the most, just in the Western world in general, we kind of like lose the soul of really what the incarnation is about in lots of ways. Uh, we aren't just our head. In fact, you know, how many of us, you know, when we act with our heart, we often like kind of think that that's somehow a lower way of acting, or we need to be suspicious because somehow that's going to take us down a place where it's not coherent enough with, say, how we should look at a situation. I've always been amazed how, and I think you could probably also agree with this, that my strongest encounters with God in my life have not come in any way packaged within, say, the context of, say, church or church teaching or things like that. It has not come that way. I mean, I've had some very like aha moments by learning things and what I'm like, oh, that's interesting and that's really profound. But they have not been the strongest encounters with God. They've been with people in situations that do not fit any of the textbook definitions of how God ought to work in this perfect doctrinal world that we like to think is possible for us to kind of be working towards. Do you resonate with that? Or, I mean, like, what would you say about that?
Absolutely. I think of the last few times that I was overwhelmed with God's goodness was actually just sitting in my office meeting with somebody for the first time who's expressed some interest in learning more about God or maybe even becoming Catholic. And oftentimes in the very first meeting, they're sharing intimate details of their life because they don't get many opportunities to sit face to face with somebody, looking in their eyes and making it safe to share their heart. We've been so isolated, and like technology has dehumanized us in so many ways. I know it can be used for good. I mean, we're talking on a podcast right now that is going to
Sure,
be
of course.
mediated.
Yeah.
But our world is starved for that face-to-face interaction, and those are the sacred places where God like shows up in powerful ways. And a lot of times they'll apologize, and I'm like, don't apologize. This is holiness. This is holy ground. Us. And then I try to share a little bit about my own struggle so they know that they're not alone. I'm not this perfect church lady who has everything together. Like, I literally have been in very difficult situations that you're in. I've been wounded. I've done wounding, but I'm not reduced to those things. That God loves me and he wants good for me, and he loves the person in front of me and wants good for them. And the more we can focus on that and not our differences or politics is making me crazy right now, I even think, like, would we have to worry as much about like the political climate if we are just sitting around tables, loving and laughing and crying and sharing with each other? We would see that we all want the same things.
It paints a beautiful picture. To connect our conversation with Bill Keimig to the conversation that we had with Cindy Black. So, Cindy started by talking about theology versus apologetics, and people think that that's what formation is about. And I have a few quotables that I got from seeing Bill in action when he was bringing the Diocese of Metuchen onto Franciscan at Home, which is one of the Catechetical Institute's kind of offerings. He said, "Education aims at the mind for learning. Formation aims at the soul for yearning," which I thought was kind of a cute thing, but sort of profound. He also said, theology, the classic kind of definition of theology, faith seeking understanding. What he said was the definition of catechetics is faith seeking a soul. And then finally, I wanted to share that he said, catechesis before evangelization is teaching the what before explaining the why. And that kind of goes back to what we had been talking about before as well, the wrong order of things. Just a way to kind of tie those two together. But, Cindy was talking a while about, kind of those first disciples and how they must have been feeling. They didn't have kind of the skills that you would expect maybe the apostles to have necessarily. And yet, these fishermen and tax collector and whatever were able to completely change the world. And I guess I wondered, do you think that Christians today, by and large, have some kind of imposter syndrome where they're thinking like they're not the disciples that Jesus has called them to be, even though they are? Or is it really the other way around, where like I have your dose of doubting their own intimacy with God is in order because we're actually not the disciples that we think we are? Where do you think, people fall to these days? And obviously there's a huge range, depending on the person. But
Yeah, I guess in general, I think most people fall into the trap of thinking about what they're not than what they are all the time. Like they realize they're not like this other person who seems to be such a tremendous disciple. Like I'm not like Mother Teresa, like something like that. And you kind of fall into this kind of place where you have an understanding of what it means to be a disciple based on how other people have responded to their own vocations. And I used to always say it's very difficult living other people's vocations. You have to live your own. And I think that's very tough because you're using other people as a model, and that's helpful. I mean, that's why we're here in this world. I mean, it's why we have the whole community of saints. I mean, they're all models. They all give us an idea of how it can be done. But it's going to be done completely unique for every single person. I just don't think there is universal signs for discipleship per se, other than the fact that there's a desire to be loved and a desire to love. I think that is just the fundamental reality that one just accepts in a spirit of vulnerability to accept that I want to be loved and I want to love. Like that is the foundational part, I would say, of discipleship, because that means that you are willing to go and follow wherever you need to go in order to be loved and to love. And sometimes it seems to work, other times it doesn't. But like it's the dynamic of that, because everything is an experience of moving to a deepening of the awareness that we are meant to be loved and we're meant to love. So I think that, yeah, a lot of people kind of are always rating their discipleship based on what they're not doing or how they're getting it wrong. But if they hold on to the desire to want to love and want to be loved, I think that's the first point of entry.
Mm-hmm. Two of the other things she was talking about, I think, are totally related. She was saying that there's this notion of like kind of consumer Catholics or consumer Christians, right? Clocking in, clocking out, kind of going through the motions as they go to church. And then the other idea that people are very guarded these days and are closed off from one another. They wish they had connection, but they're very disconnected from people. And both of these are kind of two sides of the same coin of the fact that people treat each other transactionally rather than relationally. So what do you think is something that any active Christian as they head to church can do to sort of just to check themselves against being this consumer Christian, this person who is not giving of themselves and not encountering others?
I think the consumer Christian is the one who's always at the place of thinking that they don't have what they need, so they need something from the outside. It's just like I said before, like where you're always looking at other people, like, oh, they're doing the discipleship the right way, they're doing this and that. So we're always kind of thinking that we need to acquire something in order to kind of, I guess, make us feel like we have it more together, or to make it feel as if we're kind of really doing the right thing, or that we're kind of following God the way that God would want us to follow him. Where that can be changed is by accepting the reality that you already have what you need. Like, you have what you need. If you're breathing, you have what you need. If your heart's beating, you have what you need. Everything else from the outside is going to do something to bring all those things more to life, but they're not going to really give you something that you don't already have. So now, if people look at the consumer mentality as a way of doing that, I guess that's a way to kind of maybe reconcile that. But I think you can just look at around your own house of all the stuff that you own, all the consumer products that you consume. How many of those products are making you the best version of yourself, or the really real you, the true self, however you want to look at it? How many of those things are making you into the person that you just want to be for the world?
So what you're saying is, like, down with grief ministries at churches and in with getting that Marie Kondo book about like getting rid of stuff you don't need around the house.
Well, trust me, I really liked that book, and it was kind of cool. By the way, I think that now that she has kids, I think she's kind of changed her whole attitude towards it. But anyway, the reality is that, like, I think we can make a real idol of also detachment and getting rid of things too, and just being simple. I mean, we can make an idol of everything. I'm just basically saying that, affirming that your life is already gift. You just did not create yourself. You did not choose to be born. You did not choose to live during this time in the history of the world. You don't know how long you're here for. I mean, that's just the fundamental place to begin. And then everything else that you bring into your life is supporting that in some way. I mean, and sometimes it may be a lot of things that you need to support to bring it out. Maybe it's minimal things. I don't think there's a right formula.
Keeping with the theme of people who are out there putting in the work, we also spoke with Friar Rick Riccioli, a Franciscan friar of over 40 years and the pastor of Most Holy Trinity St. Mary in Brooklyn. Friar Rick has been involved in ministry from Montreal to Toronto to Syracuse and now Brooklyn, and has years of experience in forming others. We spoke with him about the realities of forming such a diverse church. How do parishes practically approach that tension between, someone's personal identity and authenticity of who they are, and, your desire to form them in the teaching of the church, to evangelize them with the Holy Spirit? How do you meet that tension?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, because every place is a little bit different. My community in Syracuse was quite small, old German stock, but whenever a young family would come to mass at Assumption in Syracuse, everybody'd be like, oh my God, there's young people here. We could all get excited. And there was one weekend I remember this kid was crying a lot, and I'm like, oh, I could just see all the old people are going to start getting cranky and do all this stuff that makes it not very welcoming. And before I knew it, the reverse happened, actually. All the grandparents around the kid started taking the kid in their arms, and we're soothing it and letting the parents go up for communion. And it was like, oh my God, this is working. Like, they get it, right? It's not about we're grateful there's a young couple in our parish, and we're going to help you because we know how difficult it is, right? Here in Trinity in Williamsburg, I'm still getting to know the community. I got to say that, bigger parishes, sometimes you end up with a lot more gossip and judgment. What this person's wearing, do you know what this person did on the weekend? And it's like, shut up. And like, that's hard. And so, I'm honest, like, part of the divine innovation thing is casting a vision, right? Like getting people to know where we need to go and what's the vision for the future. And so reminding people, if we want to be radically welcoming, we can't sit and judge people, and we can't kind of alienate them when they come into our midst. But that takes formation. And David, you and I have talked about that, right? Like it's how do you form the parish to have that mindset, to become missionary disciples as the buzzword is now. But it's basically just be nice to people when they come to church, and it's not about you, we're going through a rehab of our how we do hospitality, and people are sort of ingrained in, well, this is my role as hospitality minister and greeter versus this. It's like we all need to be a bit more flexible so that we can do what's best for the people coming to visit us. It's not about my role, my position, my status.
So you're talking about, a posture of belonging towards people who are coming into church, but you're also doing activities that are designed to welcome new people in church, hopefully, right? So you guys are running Alpha.
So Alpha was a program I first saw in Toronto. I really didn't like it. If you haven't figured out, I'm a little bit more in the middle kind of the spectrum of the church. I found Alpha a little conservative and a little too charismatic. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And then when I got to Syracuse, I got a little bit more desperate than I was in Toronto. I'm like, okay, I'll try anything. And then I looked at Alpha again, and they had like done this film series, which was absolutely stunningly beautiful. And we started it in Syracuse. They say it takes about 5 seasons of Alpha before you start getting results. It takes a while because you're creating a culture, and that's key, right? It's a culture of hospitality and of evangelization. Alpha's not, it's not like Renew, where you do Renew and you're done, or you do this Bible study and you're done. Alpha's a way of life of hospitality. So for both the parishioners to get it and for your team to really be fine-tuned, it takes a while. And for people to get the word out that it's a good place to go. So basically, we started welcoming people, and it's, if you've not heard of Alpha, it comes out of the Episcopal Church in England. It's very basic. It's just the charisma, just introduction to Jesus Christ, right? It does still have a bit of a charismatic overtone, but you can downplay that if you want. And there's ways of making it a little bit more Catholic. But it's just meeting Jesus, right? So, and it's over a meal. So you invite people to a nice meal, a place where they can just ask questions about the meaning of life. I have my car, I've got my condo, got my job, things are going well. Now what? Like, what's the point of my life, right? So those questions, like we're helping people tackle that. And they have these, so after dinner, you watch a video, and some of them, they always make me cry. I mean, they're really powerful. And then you have conversation. And the point of it is you don't try to convince people. You let the video do its thing, and you let the table conversation do its thing. You don't, if somebody says, well, I don't like the Catholic Church because it's too rich, that's not the time to dispute that or argue. Let them say what they need to say. In this sense, let the Holy Spirit do its work. And it goes over 10 sessions, and then there's a retreat. So we've done that here. We did a big Spanish one, did some English one, I did a smaller English one. Now we're at a bit of a pause for a variety of reasons. We had to pause it. And we're going to start up in January with a youth version. So they do Alpha for youth, for young adults, for Alpha for jail, Alpha for marriage, different things you can use that way. And the other thing we've been trying to do is using arts and media to meet our neighborhood, our neighbors, right? So we've been having concert series, really, really fleshing out the blessing of animals for St. Francis Day. Again, it's just the marketing is really the big thing, like creating an opportunity for people to come, and then so that when they come, they can meet who you really are, as opposed to who they think you are.
Friar Rick was saying, it's not about you, and that refrain of humility and flexibility. It seems like the best way to do formation is the best way to just do anything, right?
Yeah, I was definitely thinking the same thing. How often do we hear, just like in the world of business and stuff like that, the importance of pivoting and things like that, doing whatever's needed, whatever's necessary in the moment. It clearly is the same thing that applies into formation. Once again, it's about like, how attentive are you? What are you listening to? What are you picking up? How are you sizing up the crowd? How are you sizing up the person so you can just be present to that person and go from there? Not to have the agenda already planned out and just then bestowing it upon the person.
And so in a practical way, when you're thinking about like, who do I have that can lead these types of things? It may not be about the person who's got the most advanced theology degree or something like that. It might be more like who is living a very integrated life, who is someone that you can just kind of count on as a solid person in general. That's going to be a great person to be welcoming people, to be, just a solid person, to be sort of an ambassador for the faith. Is kind of what we're talking about in some ways, right?
Yeah, I always like the word integration first off. I think we all are striving to have an integrated life where all our different things that we do, so to speak, really form one song rather than different types of songs that we show up for when we want to show up for particular things. I was thinking too that I think one needs a radical awareness that God, the very presence of Christ, shows up in any situation. Like there's no hierarchy of like there's more Christ here or less God here, or however you want to look at it. That you have to be willing to talk to a person about whatever interests them, because it's really your role to be able to be delighted or taken in awe of how God is already working in their life based on what just brings them joy. Like that's really important. We just don't have to always be talking about church things or spiritual things, how we typically think of those types of things. That, if a person's passionate about something, passion is a good thing. It's at the very heart of the gospel's passion. So I think that the more you're willing to be able to expand your awareness of where God is present, I find that to be the case. I mean, like, do you feel, is there a hierarchy of God's presence in your life, Dave?
No, I would even say that, it's not necessarily in the times of kind of formal prayer that I am most able to notice God's presence. That is not the case, right?
Yeah.
It can happen at any point. And that is, like you said, it's about being open to the experience. We're living, we are phenomenological beings. And so let it happen, right? Like getting back to Friar Rick's points, he talked about Alpha for a while, which is, a resource that parishes can use to, on the surface, it's about trying to evangelize. But I think that the thing that is very important about what it does is it turns a parish's posture from facing inward to facing outward, right? So much of the time, parish life is all about, how are we serving the people already in the community? But what about the people who maybe don't have community or are not in the community? So turning from ministry work to apostolate work, kind of in that apostolic mode, I think is an important function that it serves. But I wonder if, knowing you, I know you have suspicions about kind of packaged programs or initiatives rather than, another thing that he was talking about, which was like just throwing concerts, at the parish or whatever. So I just wondered like what your reactions to those types of things were.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth trying anything, I guess, to see how it connects. But the strength of anything that you use, let's just say any type of product that you bring into the mix, is all going to be dependent on the people in the room who are unpacking that product or who are kind of using it to help people. So you can never skirt around the importance that the people who are trying to be welcoming or trying to be in the place of journeying with people in some form of formation, like they have to somehow be doing the work themselves in order to be the best they can be with the people that they're encountering. There's no video or no book or anything like that that's going to be able to replace just the genuine sense of delight that a person could show to a person who's on the spiritual journey. Like, I think that's really super important. I think that those people who seem to be the least judgmental and seem to be the most vulnerable with their own strengths and weaknesses are the ones that I know I'm personally drawn to the most. The people who seem to have all the ready-made answers for all life's problems or ready-made answers to the solutions that are offered by the church. There was a time in my life where I thought that was extremely attractive and that's what I wanted, but that type of level of confidence doesn't necessarily move me anymore. I'm always taken by that quote that the opposite of faith is not doubt, but the opposite of faith is certainty.
Yeah, I heard that. I think Rohr said that in his newer book, The Tears of Things.
It's a quote from a Bay Area author, Anne Lamott, I think. Yeah, Anne Lamott.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I think also just the recognition that these things take time, right? Friar Rick talked about how They say that alpha doesn't really start becoming effective until, your fifth session or something, which can be years into the program, into the way of being, really, I guess is a better way to say it. We often say anything worth doing takes probably more than your lifetime to do. I think that type of recognition is a way of just saying, you know what, this is God at work. This is bigger than me. This is going to take everyone. And actually, like, the results, like when you do something for the glory of God, when you say you do something for the glory of God, but it makes you feel good, I mean, that's nice, right? That's like a resonance with our Creator. But when you do something that you will not see the results of during your lifetime, that's for the glory of God. Now you've really committed to something that's outside yourself, right? Or beyond yourself, I should say.
Yeah, that's true. I think, but focusing on each part of the journey as an end in itself, I think can kind of maybe remedy that whole sense that, oh, we don't see things in their fullness or their completion. Like, I don't think our life is ever meant to see things in their fullness or their completion. In fact, I don't think eternity is meant for that either. I think there's just always a constant unfolding, a constant journeying, a constant awareness of the deepening of things that just don't surprise us, but draw us out of ourselves and help us to recognize how much we're loved by God. So, like, that's just an ongoing process. So I think each step of the way needs to somehow be treated as an end in itself. I think it's how we treat the present moment as an end in itself. Like, this is the only moment that matters. The previous one doesn't no longer exist. The next one isn't here yet. So this is the only moment that matters. This is the only place where God is. And I think when you focus on that, then, it's like building the cathedral. It's like, well, if I just built the foundation in my lifetime, that was more than enough, because that was an end in itself. That was needed. Even when the cathedral's fully built, so to speak, it's going to constantly need maintenance and repair and renovation and all those things. So there's never a point where, okay, now we see everything all together perfect.
As you were speaking, I was just imagining, I've often tried and failed, let's be honest, to kind of like conceptualize what eternity is like, try to fit that into my measly little brain. You got me to think about what not infinity would have been like. And like, imagine like everyone in heaven, suddenly there's just like an end one day. How silly of an idea is that?
Right,
like,
right.
All right, everyone, we're done. We're done.
No, yeah. I mean, it's just eternal generation, right? I mean, I don't think there's any other option, right? You can't think of it any other way. I think maybe we get kind of excited by thinking like, oh, when we get to heaven, we're going to know everything, like all of our deepest wonders and just our frustrations here, why these things happened. Now we're just going to know everything. And then somehow knowing everything is just going to make us happy for all of eternity. Well, I think
that's the way that we need to be like God. Yeah.
Yeah. I think even if that was possible, that would get old very, very quickly. So clearly,
and it's just such an intellectual way to imagine the infinite life.
Well, I think that we, in the Western world, we just reduce everything to the intellectual component. So that's, and anything other than something that's intellectual is considered to be of less value or too wishy-washy or too feel-goody. Like, I mean, it's a really a big problem, because I think it just kind of fosters a level of almost arrogance on the part of people who are like, well, I understand all these things because I read all these things. I mean, like, I wish I was smart as some of the people who come up with amazing presentations of the faith. I really do. But I have to also kind of recognize the fact that what I've been given is enough, like, because what I've been given has been given to me by the same God who gave whatever intellectual prowess the other person has. So we've been given enough to be, let's just say, the conduit that God needs us to be for the world.
Yeah. No, that's right. It has to do with the resetting of the values, right? If your outlook is that wealth is the only measure of success, well, why wouldn't intelligence be the only measure of merit? But it's not what we believe. And so let's act like it, right?
Yeah.
It's largely the quote Christian world that has perpetuated that idea, that way of being.
And I think in the best way, because I think people have been very proud of the intellectual tradition and unpacking of things.
I think that's going to do it for our episode of Religion to Reality today. We hope you learned as much as we did and are maybe walking away with a new perspective on formation, whether it be how we approach it or how we welcome others in. Thank you again to our guests, Dr. Bill Keimig, Cindy Black, and Friar Rick Riccioli. For more information about Franciscan University's Catechetical Institute, go to franciscanathome.com. We hope you join us again next week, where we'll be talking about generational differences in discipleship, from the needs of our young people to the struggles of our elder parishioners. Once again, I'm your host, Dave Plisky, joined by my friend and co-host, Father John Gribowich, and we hope to see you again next time. Religion to Reality is an initiative of DeSales Media created by me, Dave Plisky, and is produced and edited by Connor Donnelly. If you found value in our conversation, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you love this show, ratings and reviews go a long way toward letting others know about the show. Go to religiontoreality.org for more details and resources. And if you are ready to take the next step and join in community with us, check out the Called Learning Community, co-founded by Father John Gribowich. Go to calledcommunity.com to sign up for our free online gatherings.